You are listening to the Yoga for Balance podcast. I'm your host, Heather Gjerde. Thank you so much for being here. Happy New Year. We're back and I have exciting conversations to share with you as we kick off 2020. The first conversation is with Ishmael, and we're going to dive into his path as a yoga teacher, student, former engineer, and what brought him here to today. Before we begin and dive in, I'd love to start with a nice grounding moment together. Of course, if you're driving or on the move, keep your eyes opened. Or if you're at home listening or somewhere where you can relax for a bit, find a nice comfortable place where you can relax and take a little break. Start out by taking a nice full breath in, fill your lungs all the way to the top. And a nice open mouth exhale to let it go. How about one more like that? Breathe in, expand. And open mouth, let go. Pause. Notice how you feel after just a couple of deep breaths. And enjoy this week's episode with Ishmael. Hello and welcome to the Yoga for Balance podcast. I have today Ishmael Sonico on the show. Welcome, Ishmael.
Hi, how's it going, Heather? Thank you for letting me on here.
It's going great. I'm so happy to have you here. We're hanging out in one of our studio spaces, Bird Rock Yoga, here steps from the beach. And life is good. Ishmael's about to teach Vinyasa flow.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to teach today, either a power flow or just a simple flow. I think I'll do a power.
Power. We like the power here at Bird Rock.
Yeah.
Our students like the power here at Bird Rock.
Fast, right?
Power flow in the infrared heat panels. What do you think of the infrared heat compared to other spaces you've taught in with heat?
Well, I think I've been to 3 different types. There was one where they were blowing hot air through the vents. That was probably not my favorite. The others where they had controlled humidity. That was really nice. So you get the heat, and if you start to dry out, it starts to blow out steam, and you still stay wet. But I really like the infrared panels. They don't blow out the heat, so it doesn't dry you up. It allows you to be a little bit more natural, and it feels really good on my body. Really dries out the sinuses sometimes, because I tend to have a raspy voice at times when I teach, but the panels, for some reason, as I'm breathing the air in, it helps.
Yeah, it's like this soothing heat. It almost kind of like wraps you up in it.
Exactly.
And you feel so cozy. I feel so grateful that as a teacher I'm exposed to that. I mean, there are people that actually will go and sit in infrared heat, saunas, and I'm like, wow, you get to meanwhile practice yoga in these
exercise
in this environment.
And the heat.
Yes. Well, let's take a little step back and introduce your story to the audience here. This is your first time on the show, so I'd love for you to just walk us through your experience of yoga.
Sure. Well, a little background on myself. I actually have a chemical engineering degree, and I started yoga, I think, at a really time in my life when I was really, really stressed. I mean, I was always stressed. That seemed to be a little bit of part of my character. But the first time was in like 2009 or so. I was introduced to it, and I thought, it's something that I can do. And then I lost my job, and I started to develop some rashes on my body, and I just couldn't control myself. And so I actually went to a yoga studio, and I was volunteering there. And they told me to try one of the yoga teacher trainings, and it taught me to breathe, to meditate. I actually went into a class, and I remember sitting in the class in child's pose, and I brought this up into one of my classes today. I was in the class in child's pose, and prior to that, my head was wandering. Sometimes you chatter. And I was thinking to myself, I really don't want to work anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to be an engineer, but I don't want to have the stress I wish it would stop. I wish I can just relax and maybe just do yoga and sit here. And as my mind was telling me all this, the guide was coming around, and he says, while you're in the surrendering pose, are you where you wanted to be? Because sometimes we don't appreciate it. And it just stopped me right there. And I thought, I'm exactly where I want to be, and I'm still stressed. I have to learn how to enjoy the moment, because I'm always thinking about the past or where I want to be in the future. But when the future becomes a present, I don't acknowledge it. And at that point, it felt like a huge ton of weight fell off of me. And the rashes disappeared, and I learned how to control my breath. And so then when I started working again, I was a little bit more calm. People may say, no, he wasn't. But I was. In my mind, I was more calm. And I thought, I need to be this way at this engineering job, but I know that I control my body so it doesn't react and create these funny things. But as time went along, I developed stress again, and I moved to San Diego. I kept planting these seeds in my mind of where I wanted to be. I do this thing, and I was telling you earlier, where I do this little game with myself, and I call it pretend. So before I go to bed, if I can't sleep, I pretend. I pretend I have a lot of money, or I pretend I have all the time in the world, or I pretend I have like this ability to have created a way to go back in time, or to change my body, or to do something. And what I do is I start planting seeds. Oftentimes I pretend that I remember before I lived in San Diego, I pretended I lived in San Diego, and I had this place that looked like a place that I lived in Orange County. And before I knew it, I was there, and I was back in the rigmarole where I was working so hard at my engineering job that I didn't appreciate it. I just had it. And I was traveling. I also pretended that I traveled all over the place. And here I was in Germany and Italy, and I still didn't appreciate that. I was working, but I wasn't appreciating it. And I was teaching yoga still. I was teaching yoga full-time in the Bay Area, but when I moved to San Diego, I actually taught just at my company. And I let my body go. I was creating what they call a hemsa, or harm to yourself and to others. I was harming my body without really knowing it. Every time I got stressed, I would just feed it bad things, knowing that it wasn't something that I wanted to do. And I got a little bit sidetracked from my practice, although I was still able to breathe and try to meditate. I actually got really heavy in 2017 from all the stress and the things that were surrounding me and the reaction that I was causing with my body. And after being, laid off in 2017, our department was diminished. I went to the doctor because I thought, I better use my medical before it runs out. And being 217 pounds at that time, they found some enzyme levels really high. They were 10 times higher than normal. I forget what they were, AST or ALT. And so they were already suggesting that I might need a liver transplant, or I might have cancer, or they wanted to check me for hepatitis. And I was really scared. And I remember telling myself, when I taught in the Bay Area, I always told my students that the body sometimes can heal if you listen to it. It'll tell you what you need to eat when you do your twists, tell you what you crave versus what you desire. And I kept having cravings for green vegetables. And at that time, so I was 217 pounds. I found that liver problem, and I just stopped. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do something right now in the present. And so I changed my diet. I was already back into yoga. I started hiking also. And within 2 months, my liver had cured. I had changed the diet and everything. I'd lost the weight. Of course, the doctor said, you're losing too much weight too fast. Be careful, because the liver can't take all the bile. Yeah. So this was in 2017. And I accomplished so much stuff after that. And I started teaching yoga. I planted another seed, doing my little pretend thing before I went to bed. And I said, pretend I was teaching in San Diego at some studios.
Here we are.
And I met people in hiking, and somebody introduced me to Bird Rock Yoga, and I auditioned here and started teaching, and this was just this year. And then of course, Vibe Flow, another yoga studio. And thank you, Heather. And so this is where I am now, and I really appreciate it. And one thing too, when I was actually working and I was 217 pounds, I had planted again in my head that if I retired early, which I wanted to do, I would be teaching yoga. I would manage my properties and watch Netflix.
Goals.
And I step back and I'm thinking, and sometimes I get into, and I like it when sometimes I step back and I think about all the things that have happened, and it's good sometimes to cry. I like to do it. I don't have any shame in that. But then I step back and I think, I remember that time I was in child's pose a long time ago, and that teacher said, "Are you where you wanted to be right now?" And as I'm sitting there on my couch watching Netflix, I think I am. I am exactly where I wanted to be. The path may have been torturous, but I'm there, and I'm okay, and I'm teaching, and I love the practice, and I still play that pretend game.
Yeah, it's amazing how powerful, like you mentioned, a seed can be when you allow yourself to plant it. And you mentioned something, I don't know if to the audience yet, but about along the way as you're imagining, also figuring in what it might take to get there. So can you talk about that process a little bit as well? Because I think there's so much power to that. Dreaming is one thing, but actually visualizing the path to get there and then enjoying that path along the way, even if it does have some bumps or torturous turns along the way.
So the first time I noticed that this was happening when I do this pretend, it's sometimes you can plant the seed, and if you want something, you'll get it. But the way that you get it may not be how you want it. It can be excruciatingly difficult. What I do when I do the imaginations or planting the seed is I actually think of a way that I am going to physically get there. So if I wanted to, say for instance, I wanted to teach yoga at studios, not at a corporate where I was before, because obviously I wasn't working there anymore. I was thinking, I will go hiking and pretend I'm hiking and I met somebody and they were tied to a yoga studio, and pretend that person introduced me, and I did the best that I could in auditioning, and I got it. Then I would be teaching, and I would and then I'd fall asleep. And that was it. That was in my dream. So actually I met a good friend, Maria, and we were hiking in North Torrey Pines, a nice little easy paced hike. And I was walking through, and a lot of the people there are older, and some of them they sit at the desk like I used to, and they had lower back problems as we got to one point where we stopped. And I said, "Hey, I know how to relieve that. Go into a forward fold. Let yourself just hang there and sway side to side. And then after that, I said, go ahead and slowly come up. Guide yourself up with your hands, up your legs." And the lead said, "Wow, that was great. Oh my gosh, that feels really good. Can we do that as part of the meetup?" And I said, "Sure. I can do a really quick 5-minute one so that we continue with the hike." And so Maria was there, and she said, "You really should be teaching. I wonder if they have any teachers there in PB where I go." And that's how I found here. That's how I found Bird Rock. She's actually one of the students here. So I planted the seed. I said where I wanted to meet the person. I said what I was going to do and what sequence also that I did and all of these things. And the more detail I found that I put into this thing that I play around with before I go to bed, the better path that I can take, or one that I feel that I'm more familiar. Of course, getting from point A to point B, I think that even if you go through a torturous path, that you learn things. You learn, through that torturous path that you need to step back maybe, or maybe through that path you learn something aside of something. I don't know. It could be anything. But at the end of the day, you get to where you wanted to be. And all you have to do, from my point of view, is acknowledge it. Because oftentimes we don't even know that we got there. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, all the things that I have now and I'm grateful for, and getting on this path with yoga again, and how I got here, and the details that I put into it, is great. There are other things that I put into my head that I wish I could have, and sometimes I can't get it. So the other benefit of pretending is that at least in my mind, once I do it, and when I put these things in my head before I sleep, I dream of them, and then it makes it so nice. So yeah, planting the seed, getting there, putting a little bit more detail in there, and then appreciating it once it happens. Sometimes I tell people, you can ask the universe a question, and I really feel that if you ask the question and you listen really carefully, that somebody may bump into you that you're not expecting, and they're answering maybe a friend. So you ask the universe, say for instance, you say, should I get this job or move, or should I stay here and see where I go with this job? And maybe as you think that in your head, you're walking through a street and somebody is talking to their friend and they say, you should definitely move, get that job. And you heard it, but you're not applying it. A lot of times I feel that those are the answers that the universe is giving you, you know. And I mean, other things can happen too. I mean, you don't even need to ask questions. I know that one time I was driving my car, and I had this brand new Volvo, and I was driving it to my hand doctor, physical therapist, and I was speeding through this street that was within a residential. Shouldn't have been doing that. And my new Volvo beeped, and I looked down at the radio, and on there it said, drive carefully. So I slowed down, and I said, that's really neat. I didn't know there was some kind of technology like that in my car. And I looked around, I said, maybe it's a police officer projecting, Wi-Fi into my car. I'm an engineer. That's really interesting. And as I slowed down, I went from like maybe 65 in a 35 zone. Bad me. It was a long time ago. And I got down to about 20, just below 5 miles per hour, below the speed limit. I was thinking, whoa, where's that police? And as I went around, they were just setting up around the curve, cutting the trees. If I had been flying by there at that point, at that speed, I would have ran everyone over and barreled into the back of this tree munching truck. I don't know what you call it. So I called my friend and I said, wow. And my friend Dave helped me with friends and family get this car. And I said, wow, Dave, this car, this X60 is so neat. My gosh, it told me to slow down. And there was something, I would have crashed into it. And he said, no car does that. I don't know what you're talking about. And I thought, well, that was kind of scary, but if I didn't pay attention and I didn't listen and I wasn't aware, my path would have been completely different at the end of this. So I always say, just, ask the universe a question and pay attention. If you pay attention, you'll find the answers to a lot of questions. So.
Yes, but you have to have your awareness up.
That's right.
And you have to be looking around. And I find when you're, driving and your mind is wandering, and why this practice and why I love to start my day with the meditation, it's because you tune yourself into the present so that you can be aware and awake to the things that are maybe being signaled to you, versus if you're in your mind and you're jumping from one thought to the next and you don't have a practice like this, you could just get caught in that anxiety loop. And you're not aware of the things around you. You're not paying attention so that you could slow down and move around obstacles in the road, because that's going to happen.
Yeah. I really like the teacher training that I had, and I encourage everyone to just go through it, even if you're not going to teach, because one thing that I found, it built up my confidence, and I felt like I could do anything the first time, even the second, third time if I went through it again. But it really opens your eyes up to more than just a yoga practice. It's a lot more, for me it was a lot deeper. The breath as the energy or the spirit that helps you move your body with the control of your mind. That mind, body, and energy is really, really powerful. I mean, just like you plant a seed, like they said in our practice, and you don't hold on to things so tight, because it will actually, laws of attraction, and it's usually opposite, it'll fly away. But if you appreciate things, and if you don't get it, it's not so bad, you'll find things coming towards you in abundance. In the practice, I mean, a lot of times they'll say your chakras, and other people say, what are those? And I always talk about the heart. And really, if you want to be more physical about it, it's the presentation. So when you open up your shoulders and you stand more upright, not only helps you when you're breathing, it gives you the efficiency of breath, but it also attracts people because you are looking more sure of yourself. If you talk about the energy levels, you're actually projecting positive energy around you, and people can feel that. Mm-hmm. And I find that a lot. And these kind of things are things that I learned while doing yoga. Just the energies, the 7 major ones, although we have hundreds of them, the 7 major ones, when you open them up, really do make you feel in balance. And I always say that balance is not about standing still, right? It's about being flexible to those changes around you. And so when you can open up these energy centers, sometimes they may go out of whack, but that just tells you that you need to move a little bit here or there. And those teachings that I got from yoga helped me deal with a lot of the things that I have gone through. You know, people have done the same thing. There's personal injury. There's people passing in your family. Just so many difficult things that we have to go through, and this is a path that we take. But with yoga, and being able to control my reactions, it's a lot better. And if you know me personally, a lot of my friends are like, "Whoa, he's the most stressed out person in the world." Sometimes that is the person, and that's the way that they deal with it. They don't harvest things and hold things in, but to me, I say they're more transparent. If they're sad, they're sad. If they're unhappy, they're unhappy. There's nothing about them that you're not going to know, because they'll express it through either their facial features or through their words or through their actions. And that's just them. You know, that's just the way that they are. And I accept that with everyone. I mean, if they're not as expressive, that's them. That's the way that they're going to do it. With me, I am expressive, but at the same time, I can stand back, like I did with that heavy weight and the problem with my liver, and figure out what I need to do. You know, put myself into another position. You know.
And I could see on the opposite of that coin of what you were just talking about, if you don't express it, I think I'm in your same boat. I'm very expressive. Yeah. I wear, my heart on my sleeve. I express my emotions openly as a way of processing and healing. And I have heard that as well from some people, that either, yes, I'm a very emotional person, but I'm also a very happy person. Yeah. But when I'm sad, I'm like, yes, like when I'm sad, I'm bawling my eyes out. Like when my best friend passed away for a year, I would just bawl my eyes out whenever it felt right, and I still do sometimes. But I think when you look at the opposite of that, if you're keeping it bottled up, you're not expressing those emotions. And that's something we talk about in Tantra a lot, is really honoring your emotions where they are. Not one emotion is better than the other. And we talk about this in yoga, that if you don't express those emotions and honor them and bring light to them and air them out, then you're just stuffing them away somewhere. Right. And often we see that literally in the body. Grief through the shoulders, emotions in the hips, shame, guilt, all of it. We're just going to carry that in. So it's like at some point, those emotions you're feeling need to come out one way or another, or they're just going to get bottled up, and then it's just going to be like this explosion. So learning to let it go along the way, even though it's going to be a little painful here, a little painful there, at least then I found at least doesn't bubble up to this like giant explosion at the end.
Yeah, I used to live in South Africa, and I had a friend who always looked happy, you know, and he told me, he said, you know, I come across very, very, this is how he spoke, right?
I love the accent.
When I do that, I have to go back into that. I come across very, very calm, and that I smile all the time, but honestly, when I go home and I say that I need my space, I need to go home and I cry. And I do that maybe once a week or maybe once a month, but at that time, people must just let me go, and then I cry. And I thought about that. I thought, you know, I can do that too, instead of doing it in front of people. But, you know, people deal with it differently. So sometimes when I look at people and I see them and I say, how come they're not so stressed? You know, they're doing the same thing I'm doing, and I know the same stress. And then I think about this friend of mine in South Africa, and I say, maybe they go into their room and they do the same thing. And, you know, some of them do. They go home and they'll sit there and they think about things that they've gone through and how they survived them, and they cry. Or sometimes they go home by themselves. I actually caught one of my roommates just moving around and making expressions, and I thought, who's he talking to? And I looked in, there was nobody there. But those people, they find themselves and they express themselves, but they'll do it by themselves. And in some ways, they do it even more. They don't hold back anything at all. And their entire body moves, and their expressions. And then once they're done, they just come out and they feel relieved. And they do, and that's their way of doing it. You know? So I think of it that way as well. Now, you're right. If you hold it in, I do see a lot of things happening. If people hold it in and they've never let it out, stress is a key thing to it's like a catalyst for everything. I mean, if you hold in emotions, eventually, you know, that filing cabinet where you put it away is going to just plop open. And if I think of it as in engineering, if you put pressure and you don't deal with the issue that you have in engineering, and maybe something's leaking into somewhere, or there's too much heat going somewhere, that you eventually create so much pressure that it exceeds the failure system that's been put in place, and it just goes off. So, and it's not a nice thing sometimes. So, I think that it's important to, however you do it, to express yourself, even if you need to go home and put yourself in a closet and start yelling in the closet, and then somebody opens it up and you're just like, hello. These clothes here look like something, you know? Yeah. And I think the other thing too, what I do is, when I was in high school, this is leading up to this, but when I was in high school, we took these tests to see your creative and your technical side of the brain, which one was more dominant and which career you should go into. I don't know if they did that when you were in high school. Two of us had both sides of our brains almost equal. That was myself and this other guy. And so I went to chemical engineering, and then I been doing yoga, you know, the creative side. And I think that, you know, you can balance yourself. So as I go through yoga now, and I'm not really doing technical, I do body combat on the side. And I love that. It's a way of me expressing. If I can think of somebody who's upset me, but I don't want to harm them, I sit there in my favorite instructor's class, and she says, that person who you got in a fight with, pretend they're right in front of you. And my energy level goes up. And I remember as I wanted to lose weight, it started dropping down. And I felt more balanced. So I like the contrast. And I think even in yoga, if you don't want to do body combat, you can find a lot of things that contrast, like this vibe flow, the technology and the tradition. You have yoga where you practice, And then you have this new, and I call VibeFlow a startup company, a new technology that actually, for me, it feels like it works. I love the practices that we've been doing. I have developed trigger finger from which was on set from carpal tunnel from my first job. I had a boss who gave me 3 computers, and he told me, like, it was a time when we were letting people go. I said, this is impossible. We have 21 simulations, and each of them have a permutation. I can't possibly finish it in 3 weeks. I only have 1 computer. And he said, well, there are people on the bench. If you don't want to do that, then we can take one of them on here. Weren't you buying a property or something? Ouch. And I felt scared. I mean, what are you going to do? That was one of my goals, is to own a property. And I thought, okay. And he says, I will give you 3 computers. And he gave me 3 computers. Anyways, I got carpal tunnel, and I had the trigger finger. But these VibeFlow plates, because I use this thing called an H-wave, and it actually sends pulses. And it's not medically proven, but for me, I know my body, it makes it feel good. I wasn't able to make a fist before. But these Vibe plates, they also feel great on my body, especially in gorilla pose, because you have to put your palms underneath. Put your palms underneath your feet and step on them. You can massage them, and you really look like a gorilla, right? You're upside down. And with the Vibe plates on, it really feels good, because there's a lot of fascia that builds up on this finger of mine where it has trigger finger. And with the H-wave vibrating, it really removes a lot of it and helps me with the functionality. And I feel really great the same way when we go into the Vibe plates.
Yeah, so to describe the studio concept a little more, the first one will be opening in Del Mar. We're going to be, in the next couple of weeks, opening up there.
Yeah.
And there's a vibration plate that's built into the floor underneath where your yoga mat will go. So you're literally practicing on top of this plate. It's the same technology that astronauts use in outer space to maintain muscle mass. It's the vertical is the gravity, so it's the same as gravity, working with the body and the gravity of the earth. And yeah, you warm up on without the plate on, you turn it on after your Sun A through your standing series, and then the series kind of, and I think you kind of talked a lot about this, is finding this balance between the technical side, the creative side. And what I find really interesting with the space is there's these really creative sequences. Megan, our lead instructor, is incredible. She's come up with these amazing sequences, such a good variety. And then you have this high technology. So you're, moving through a power hatha or a power vinyasa flow that's kind of creative. Us teachers are going to be able to be creative in our own approach to the practice. And then you're incorporating this brand new technology that you have to feel it to believe it. And definitely after the first time I practiced, we had a concept studio open where we were training and interviewing and auditioning, and then, of course, having some people come in to experience the plates. The next day or two, I was sore in the craziest places because your whole body is receiving those vibrations, and you can move it anywhere from 20, 30, 40, up to 50 hertz. I think it goes higher than that, but 60. I would not recommend exceeding 50 to 60 at the most. It's pretty intense. But yeah, definitely a really cool concept. Billy, the CEO founder, and there's a couple different ones in the mix. Really smart, innovative thinkers, and I think it's going to be a really interesting spin in the industry with the sound off headphones as well. So you also have the technology on that aspect. So you practice because of the vibration plates and the noise that they create. We practice with sound off headphones on, and then the instructor has a microphone as well. And so you get to hear the class through your headphones, and you're really practicing then in this really intimate space on your own plate, which you can customize the hertz to your own liking and your own experience level. So it just creates this really interesting experience. And then you come to a space like this, a vinyasa at Bird Rock Yoga, it's a vinyasa studio. Then the sequencing is where you can get really creative.
Right.
And you're working within a framework, but you have your flexibility with that. So just so many different ways to experience yoga. And I think it's fun to explore and see what works for you, and maybe step out of your comfort zone here and there to try something different, especially if it is going to challenge you and just be out of your comfort zone.
Exactly. No, I like that. I was telling someone about, bird rock and vibe flow. And vibe flow, we have the set sequences, which I think are important because we're on the vibe plates. Mm-hmm. We do need guidance, I think, in some of the sequences and how we present it. But I like the fact that here at Bird Rock also that we can take some of those sequences and add on to it. And the things that we may not be able to incorporate at Vibe Flow, and I'm sure that we could, we can practice them here and mm-hmm. build on from our base and express ourselves individually. Because at Bird Rock, I mean, everyone's different here. Mm-hmm. And that's what I like. I have the same thing in the Bay Area at Just Breathe Yoga. Mm-hmm. They were great. That was the first yoga studio I taught up in the Bay Area, and everyone was different from their voice, from the way they taught. They even had one guy who did MMA fighting, and he was amazing. He was before my class, and I thought that doesn't quite look like yoga, but it looks fun. Mm-hmm. They did it on the mat, so yeah, I think that Vibe Flow and Bird Rock, I think it's a really good balance. Mm-hmm. You got that technology, and you have the sequences that are made up for us just to make sure that we're safe. And then here at Bird Rock, being able to take your own sequences and maybe incorporate a little bit from the other studio, and then add on some different ones that you haven't done at all, mm-hmm. just to see how it feels on the body, mm-hmm. On yourself first before you do it in students.
Always have to have the self-practice. Yeah, and I think it's a fun challenge as a teacher to be in these different spaces as well. I think it keeps you creative when you can't have your mind wrapped around the sequencing aspect, and it's like, okay, that's there, like I've got it now. Of course, at the beginning, memorizing the sequences is one thing, but then from there being like, okay, that's there, that's set. Now I can get really creative in the sequence or in the theme of the class, and I think that's where you can just have some real transformation and I love the way you theme your class and the golden nuggets you drop. And I don't know if we mentioned on the podcast, but Melissa St. James, a studio owner here, recommended Theme Weaver, and I love that book. I don't know if you've read that one. You're also always welcome to borrow. But
yeah. For sure.
Yeah, I think it's fun to be able to get creative in different ways to share the theory of yoga with students that goes so far beyond the asana. And I think that's something we do really well here in this space, and that's going to be done really well also in the other space. Yeah,
that's a good point. I taught in the Bay Area, and there's different types of students, people who like to just go in, they like to do their practice, some that are not really into the spiritual side of it. So sometimes I like to speak in just normal language about certain things. Instead of using the Sanskrit, I will just say what it is instead of saying the energy centers, because I still believe in the energy centers. But I tell them, like I say, open up your chest more, because it will bring more efficiency. There's almost so many things that where you can explain it, but they do have an explanation of why you do things. Mm-hmm. If you focus on your throat, which is truth, then you can present better. You can speak from your heart more, and when you do that, and you don't have to try to memorize things and try to make up things that you don't feel so intimate about, it actually comes out more freely and believable, and that can be used anywhere. It can be used in yoga, among friends, and business. So I think that the practice is really, it opens up so many things for everyone, just whatever they are. I had a lot of A-type people in the Bay Area, and when I first taught it, it was challenging. I thought, how am I going to do this? Because every pose that I mentioned, like gorilla pose, my favorite pose, I had someone say, "Hey, Mike, that should be easy for you because you're doing that all day." And I thought, this is going to be difficult. But I when I worked in South Africa, I had a meeting, and my boss told me, because they would start in English and then they'd end up in Afrikaans, and I lost the meeting because I couldn't speak it. And my boss said, I don't care how you do it, but you need to control your meetings, or we don't need you here. So I picked up a little bit of Afrikaans, and the first thing I said was, I don't understand, you have to speak English. And I said it in Afrikaans, and everyone stopped, and they said, whoa, how did he learn that? So I think that, there's so many things that you can do on your mat, and you can apply it in everyday life. As you're going through a lot of practice, and you're going, oh, this hurts. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. This doesn't feel right. And then you find that point, you go, oh, if I adjust over here, that doesn't hurt. That feels right. Oh, I know how to do this now. Or maybe you're sitting there and you're saying, this guy talks too much about all the things going around in your body and this. Can you just say where to go and then quiet down? Then you go into a business meeting and you're thinking, boy, I wish that guy would stop getting off and, derailing my meeting because I'm trying to get to this point. And this is where you learn the patience from your practice. And you learn how to bring people back into the practice or back into your meeting. So I think there's a lot of things that you can do on your mat, and it is your own practice. And you have an opportunity to figure out what you're going to do and how you're going to react outside of your mat.
Yeah, in a place that's more conscious, and that right. you are thinking about it, so that when that subconscious opportunity comes up, you've rewired yourself in that slow time right. to yourself. You've given yourself the space to recognize that behavior, that pattern, right. and say, oh, I don't want to be impatient in this pose. I want to be able to sit here and breathe right. and be peaceful. And yeah. Right. I completely agree. Thank you. You're welcome. Final 2 questions.
Sure.
What is a 10-minute tip? I think you've brought up a lot of great tips throughout this conversation, but 10 minutes for anyone to do at home today to find more balance.
Oh, so for yoga, I've been told, as we get older, we tend to shrink. But I remember that same yoga instructor who told me, are you where you want to be at this point? He mentioned this, and I believe it too. It actually helps a lot. It calms you down. If you get into child's pose at the end of each day and just sit there for 5 minutes, just come into that pose. It's surrendering, and it also builds up patience, but it also lengthens your spine. You bring your head below your heart, you slow down your heartbeat, and as you reach further, you can think of so many things at one time in your life. You're reaching further, you're growing, you're lengthening, you're rejuvenating your body, you're letting the day end in a nice, peaceful way. So that's a tip. That's a really good pose to go into. If you had carpal tunnel like I did, gorilla pose is really nice also. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe a little forward fold with gorilla pose for a few minutes, and then bring it down to a child's.
Yeah, just to release your lower back. Yeah.
And finally, in honor of the show title, Yoga for Balance, what does balance feel like to you?
So I think I mentioned it. So to me, balance is not about standing still, but there's so many things that happen around us. You may lose your job. Someone may disappear from your life. You may have an argument. But balance to me is accepting all these things and accepting the differences in people and circumstances, and being able to react in a positive way, saying that you learned something from it, that you're doing something for yourself. And really, it's not about staying still if you're being balanced. It's about being flexible to the things that change around you. And that way, you can be balanced.
Thank you, Ishmael.
You're welcome.
And thank you at home for listening. I hope you appreciated this week's episode of the Yoga for Balance podcast. If you haven't already, you can help our show grow by leaving a review and a 5-star rating wherever you listen. And do share this episode if you think your friends, family, or connections would appreciate what you heard today. The light in me bows to and honors the light in you. Thank you again for listening, and until next time, namaste.